it's okay to put a politician on the spot because, as we just said, they work for you. You're the boss. So ask your employees those questions that you want to ask. You have every right to do that.
Governor, can you help us understand the difference between what most Americans think is their responsibility as citizens and what the founders told us would be our responsibilities if we were to keep this constitutional republic they gave us?
It's good that you mentioned that we are a constitutional republic because so many people I hear, particularly in the culture of today, and people who are elected who ought to know better, they will say things like, we've got to protect our democracy, and this group is an enemy of democracy. Well, that's fine. We're not a democracy. A democracy is basically majority rule all the time. Virtually, it's, if you want to, call it mob rule. It's whoever has the most votes. It's the sort of the survival of the fittest. It's Darwinian in nature, if you will. That's not who we are. Our country was never created to be majority ruled. It was designed to be ruled by a constitution with elected representatives who were then empowered to vote the will of the people. But there was also checks and balances built in. And this is the genius of our Constitution and the genius of our founding fathers. 3 branches of government, none of which is better than the other, more powerful than the other. You have to have agreement with the powers of government in order for it to function. One reason it's so difficult for it to function. But we need to recognize that voting is that we're voting to preserve this constitutional republic. We're voting to make sure that we don't fall into mob rule, that we don't allow people who may have power to have it unrestricted and unrestrained, because then that's when tyranny sets in.
Yeah.
Our biggest danger, our biggest threat right now is that we are rapidly moving toward a society of tyranny rather than a society and a government of order and law and the rule of the law rather than rule of the passions of men.
We look to these people that we elect to be our quote-unquote leaders, when really that's not what they are. They're public servants of the true leaders, who is what? We the people. So this idea that we're electing people to guide us, to lead us, to be our officials, well, wait a minute, no. If we really love the United States of America, we need to go back to the idea that the people with the highest form of authority that govern this land is not the executive branch or the Supreme Court judges or the legislators. It's we the people, and they are there as our servants to represent our values and protect our freedoms. And I think if we go into the voting booth understanding that, that'll help us know who to vote for.
That's a great point. I mean, people who get elected to office need to never forget that they work for the people who elected them. They're not the bosses. They're the employees, and they're subject to getting fired. And we'd be better off if we fired a bunch of them. When I was governor, Kirk, one of the things I did for my very first day in office, we put a large frame in the outer office of the governor's office on the second floor of the state capitol. Every person who came in would see it. And there was, in this large frame, an inscription at the top that said, "Our Boss." And you might think, well, that's where my picture was. In the almost 11 years I was governor, my picture was never in that frame. Every week or two, we would change it, and we would put some ordinary Arkansas citizen's picture there. We might put a couple celebrating a 50th anniversary, maybe a scout troop. We might put a 7-year-old who had done some wonderful deed in his community. It was always some citizen of our state, and we'd put their picture there. And I said to my staff every single week, when you walk into this office, I want you to never forget who the boss is. It's not the guy sitting in the corner office with the nice view down Capitol Avenue and another one down the Arkansas River. It's the guy out there that came home bone tired from working in a factory, wearing a hard hat and carrying a lunch pail, and he came home sweating through his socks, and he went home to feed his family. That's your boss. And don't ever mistreat him. Don't ever talk back to him. If he comes in here, even if he smells bad from a hard day's work or maybe not having bathed in a week, treat him like he's the boss, because he is our boss, and let's never forget it.
Mike, what would you say to somebody who really has a personal revival about these types of things and saying, I'm ready to get involved. In fact, I'd like to be able to serve in my local community some way, but I don't have a lot of time. Like you said, I'm working all day. I'm sweating through my socks just to be able to keep the lights on. Are there some ways that people can get involved in addition to voting that aren't incredibly time consuming?
You know, if a person lives in a community, they ought to attend school board and city council meetings, for example, so that when policies come up, they're prepared to stand up and say, I object to that. Exercise the most basic form of citizenship and do it in the most basic, fundamental avenues of our citizenship in government. I'd love for more people who are believers to say, I'm going to run for school board, I'm going to run for city council or county commission. But if they don't want to do that, then volunteer in someone's campaign in whom you believe. It may be a candidate. You just like them. They're strong pro-life. Maybe they go to your church and they're running for the first time. Maybe you can't give them 20, 30, 40 hours a week. Probably not. But give them 10 hours a week. Volunteer to set up chairs or to put up signs. Candidates need folks who will do the grunt work. And sometimes I've had so many people say, oh my gosh, I would never run for office. I couldn't do that. Okay, that's true. A lot of people couldn't and wouldn't. So don't. Don't force yourself into something you would be miserable at, but go help somebody who has signed up to be down there in the front trench, right where the bullets are flying, and help that person get elected.
Mike, when you want to get a message across to your representatives or people who are running for office, and you want to say, hey, this is what's important to me, what's the best way to do that? I have visions in my mind of making a phone call and maybe that message never gets to them, or sending them an email. What's the best way to communicate with potential representatives?
Well, I'd say do all of the above, but here's some maybe specific things. Keep it to one page. Make sure it's typed, not handwritten, unless you have magnificent handwriting, which people like me don't. Make it where it's easy to read. As I say, keep it to one page. Don't be threatening and don't be accusatory. I don't know how many times somebody gets a letter, and here's how it starts. Dear Kirk Cameron, I think you're the biggest idiot that ever got elected to Congress. I can't believe that you have voted the way you did, and I just want you to know I will never, ever vote for you again, and I will ask all my friends not to either. I read that as a paragraph, and my first thought is, well, we're not even going to mark him down as undecided. There's no point in reaching out because he's already said he's never going to vote for me. What's the point? Better way to start that letter is to say, Dear Kirk, I had such confidence in you when I voted for you when you entered Congress, and I still believe you're a good and decent person and you want to do the right thing. But I'm troubled by your recent vote to allow abortion because I feel that it's against what you told me in a conversation or what I heard you say in a rally, and say, could you please explain to me, have you changed your position, and if so, why? And if you haven't, please, next time a vote like that comes up, make us proud of you. We're counting on you. You see, that's a totally different approach, and that letter would make me say, oh my gosh, I've disappointed one of my supporters. I don't want to do that. But email, regular mail, make a phone call, go to that person's public events. Don't make a scene. Don't yell, scream, interrupt in the middle of a speech or be rowdy. But if there's a time for questions and answers, raise one's hand, ask respectfully the question, and, it's okay to put a politician on the spot because, as we just said, they work for you. You're the boss. So ask your employees those questions that you want to ask. You have every right to do that.
Mike, some people feel a little awkward about getting involved in politics, but as believers, does God give us scriptural requirements to get involved? What does the Bible say is our responsibility as members of the household of faith?
For those of us who live in a free society, when the Scripture says that we should be mindful to pray for our leaders and our rulers, that's part of it, and that's given even if we were in a totalitarian government. We're supposed to pray for our leaders. But we're in a unique position in America. We actually have citizenship. We have not just the responsibility, we have the right to vote, the right to free speech, the right to challenge our government. And so when we're given that right, for us to fail to utilize it, it's really, I'm going to go so far, Kirk, to say I think it's a sin against God for us to be given such a wonderful religious liberty, personal freedom, to be given freedom of speech and freedom of thought and freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, and then to abuse it by never being grateful enough for it, that we would exercise the full rights of our citizenship. Let's just remember, and I'll be quick about this, but the Apostle Paul was a Roman citizen. So when he was accused of insurrection, what did he do? Did he say, oh, yes, throw me in jail, I don't care? No, he said, I want to appeal my case to Caesar. So what he was doing was saying, I'm a Roman citizen. I have certain rights as a Roman citizen. One of them is I get to appeal any judgment against me all the way to Caesar. And he exercised his rights of citizenship. That's a great example for what we ought to be doing.
Mike, how does the right to vote set us apart from other countries around the world? I think sometimes we just don't understand what the alternative is. I think a lot of people just think, well, you know what, it might be kind of nice for other people to make the decisions for us. Just kind of pay for my food, pay for my education and my health care, and I don't have to sort of figure this stuff out for myself.
Well, what people ought to do is to realize voting is not voting for someone who is promising you something, because when they do, they're promising you something that they're going to give you with your own money. So government has no money it doesn't take from its people. So unless you want there to be some free gift out there for people that you're going to pay for, you better vote for people who have a sense of real fiscal responsibility and who don't want to spend more money than they take in. As individuals, we can't spend money we don't have, and we can't borrow money we can't afford to pay back. Why should we vote for people who spend money we do not have and who borrow money that, as a country, we can't afford to pay back? So make your vote about, does this person believe in the Constitution? Do they want to protect the basic rights, even of the people we disagree with? Because if you only want to protect the rights of the people who agree with you, that's not real citizenship in the United States. Our job as citizens is to protect not just the rights of the majority, but protect the rights of the minority without letting the minority run the country or letting the majority run over the minority. We have a brilliant, I consider it a God-inspired government. It's brilliant in its really construction because it even assumes that we are basically sinners.
That's right.
What kind of government makes that assumption that because we're sinners, we need checks and balances? We need other branches of government to keep us from getting out of control, which is the reason we have three branches rather than just elect a monarch, and he has sovereign rule and dictatorial authority. But if we don't exercise within that role of three branches, and we don't have the accountability, and we don't do the checks and balances, well, we might as well be a totalitarian government, and quite frankly, we are. And that's the tyranny that we can't afford to experience.
Some people are saying, look, it's all or nothing. If you're not pro-life, I'm not voting for you. And others would say, well, I don't have any options who are pro-life, but I want to go with the one who can at least get us going in the right direction, even if they're not everything I'm hoping that they're going to be. And they can win.
Well, I think voting for someone who can win is important, but voting for someone who shares basic core values is important. But be careful not to say, I'm only going to vote for a person who checks every box that I believe in, because that may be a tough deal to find somebody that is identical to one's beliefs. And I would say this, if a person says, I'm only going to vote for a person who thinks just like me, then you better be the candidate, because the only person who will think just like you will be you. So be the candidate, go out there and run. But if you're not going to do that, it's a matter of looking at the options and saying, who reflects the closest, not just to what they say, but to what they're going to do when they're in office. I know some people that are not necessarily righteous. I'll never find them in church on Sunday morning. But when it comes to their vote, they're going to vote for things that do matter. They will vote, for example, to protect human life. They will vote to believe that mothers and fathers raise better kids than the governments do, and they believe in parental rights rather than government control of our children. They believe that we ought to bless Israel, and God will bless us if we do, rather than to be a curse to Israel. Those are important issues to me as a Christian believer, but there may be somebody who doesn't share my faith, but who shares those views. And I always say that if I had a terminally ill family member and that person needed surgery that might save his or her life, I had two choices of a doctor. One had a bedside manner that was atrocious. The doctor was vulgar and rude, came in and basically just said, look, if you want me to do the surgery, I'll do it, but I ain't got time to answer a lot of questions. The other option for a surgeon came in, sat on the side of the bed, held your relative's hand, prayed, was so kind and gentle. But here's the difference. That rough bedside manner doctor had done the surgery 700 times and 98% of his patients lived. The other one is just right out of med school and residency. He's only done the surgery 12 times and 8 of his patients died. Who do you pick to do the surgery? Well, let me tell you who I pick. I'll worry about the bedside manner on another level. I want the very best surgeon I can get for my loved one, because his job is not to be nice to me, it's not to make me feel comfortable. His job is to save the life of my relative, and that's why I hire him to be my doctor. That's how we ought to look at how we hire the people to serve us in government. Who's going to get that job done?
Hey, thanks for watching my interview with Governor Mike Huckabee. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another episode. And if this video made an impact on your life, share it with a friend so others can enjoy it, and then drop us a comment so our community can celebrate together.